understanding the great matter of birth and death can help us discover the quiet joy of waking up to what is already here. Before we begin, feel free to share what time it is and where you're listening from. We live as though this life will go on forever. We postpone the things that matter most. We save our presence, our love, our attention for later. But somewhere inside, we know this is not true. And when we truly feel this knowing, something shifts. Life becomes more vivid. This ordinary moment reveals itself as extraordinary. The great matter is not about fearing death. It is about embracing life. When we stop pretending that we have forever, we begin to live more fully. The fog of postponement lifts, and we see clearly what has always been here. Tonight, we will sit with this ancient teaching together. We will meet people who discovered, in their own ways, what it means to truly value this brief and precious life. We will explore not with heaviness, but with the gentle clarity that comes when we stop running from truth. Let your breathing settle now, and let's begin our journey together. What makes something precious? Often, it is knowing that it will not last forever. A sunset holds us because it is fading. Spring blossoms move us because they will soon fall. The embrace of someone we love matters because we know, even if we do not speak it, that we will not always have this. Zen Buddhism asks us to bring this awareness to life itself, not as a grim reminder, but as a gentle awakening. When we truly understand that this life is brief, something opens in us. We stop taking things for granted. We begin to see what was always here, but hidden by our assumption of endless time. The Buddha spoke of the preciousness of human birth. He said it was as rare as a blind turtle surfacing in a vast ocean and happening to put its head through a small floating ring. This image is not meant to make us feel special in an egoistic way. It is meant to help us feel the extraordinary gift of being alive at all, of being conscious, of having this chance to love and learn and grow. Most of us live as though we have 1,000 years ahead of us. We postpone joy. We delay presence. We tell ourselves we will appreciate life more fully later, when we are less busy, when circumstances improve, when we finally have time. But later never arrives in the way we imagine. There is only now, arriving again and again, and we keep missing it. The great matter invites us to stop missing it. Not through fear, but through a deep recognition of how precious each ordinary moment truly is. Let us explore a story about a man who discovered this truth in an unexpected way. In a coastal town where the smell of salt hung always in the air, there lived a merchant named Shin who had spent his life acquiring things. He had a large house on the hill overlooking the harbor, filled with objects from distant lands. Carved jade from the north, silk tapestries from the west, porcelain vases so delicate they seemed made of frozen light. He had storerooms of spices and rare woods, and more money than he could spend in several lifetimes. Shin had worked hard for all of this. As a young man, he had started with nothing, loading cargo on the docks for a few coins a day. He had watched the wealthy merchants come and go, and he had promised himself that one day he would be one of them. And through years of shrewd trading and careful saving, he had succeeded beyond even his own dreams. But now, at 50 years old, Shin felt strangely hollow. He would walk through his beautiful rooms and feel nothing. The jade sat on its shelf, and he could not remember the last time he had really looked at it. He would eat fine food prepared by his cook, and the tastes seemed muted, distant, as though he were eating through a layer of cloth. He would watch the sunset over the harbor from his terrace, the sky turning gold and crimson, and find himself thinking only of tomorrow's shipments, tomorrow's profits, tomorrow's plans. Life seemed to pass through him without leaving any mark. The days blurred together. Seasons changed, and he barely noticed. He was successful by every measure the world offered, and yet something essential was missing. Shin employed many servants, but the one who had been with him longest was an old man named Bora. Bora had worked in the household since before Shin inherited his father's modest fishing boat, long before the wealth had come. He had watched Shin rise from nothing to everything. Now Bora was old, his hair white, his movements slow. He swept the floors, tended the garden, and moved through his days with a quiet contentment that Shin sometimes noticed but never understood. One autumn, when the leaves were turning gold and the air carried the first hint of winter, Bora fell ill. It was not serious, the healer said, but he was old and needed rest. Shin visited him in his small room at the edge of the property, more out of obligation than genuine concern. The room was sparse and simple. A sleeping mat on the floor, a thin blanket folded neatly, a few worn clothes hanging on pegs, a chipped cup beside a small brazier. On a wooden ledge near the window sat a smooth grey stone, the only decoration in the room. Shin looked around with something like pity mixed with discomfort. After all these years of service, after decades of loyal work, this was all the old man had to show for his life. This bare room, these few possessions, this small stone. You should have saved more, Shin said, trying to fill the silence. You should have asked for higher wages over the years. I would have given them. Look at this room. There is nothing here. Bora was propped up on his mat, his back against the wall. He looked tired, but his eyes held a warmth that made Shin feel suddenly uncertain, as though the old servant knew something he did not. May I ask you something? Bora said. His voice was soft but clear. Of course. When you die, what will you miss most? The question struck Shin like a cold wave. He felt his mouth open, but no words came. He thought of his house, his jade, his silks, his successful trades. He thought of the fine meals he ate alone in his dining room. He thought of his days, one blurring into the next, each indistinguishable from the one before. What would he miss? He did not know. He could not name a single thing. I have not thought about it, he admitted finally. The words felt shameful somehow. Bora nodded slowly, as though this answer did not surprise him. I have thought about it often. Would you like to know what I will miss? Shin said nothing, but he did not leave. He found he could not leave. He stood in the small bare room, surrounded by almost nothing, and waited. Bora's eyes moved to the window, where the afternoon light was slanting in, catching dust motes in the air and making them glow like tiny stars. I will miss the way the light comes through the kitchen window in early morning, Bora said. There is a moment, just as the sun clears the hills, when everything turns gold. I have seen it 1,000 times, and it still makes me stop what I am doing just to look. He paused, and a small smile crossed his weathered face. I will miss the smell of the garden after rain, the way the earth opens up and releases something green and alive. I will miss the sound of children playing in the street outside the wall, even though none of them are mine. Their laughter is like water. It flows in and washes something clean. Shin stood very still. He had heard children playing outside his walls countless times. He had never once stopped to listen. I will miss the taste of my evening tea, Bora continued. I drink it slowly after my work is done, while the stars come out. The tea is nothing special, just common leaves. But the drinking of it, the warmth of the cup in my hands, the way the steam rises and disappears, that is something I will miss very much. His eyes moved to the stone on the ledge. I will miss the weight of that stone in my palm. I found it by the river 30 years ago, on a day when the light was very clear and the water was singing over the rocks. I have held it almost every day since. It is smooth and cool and fits perfectly in my hand. Such a small thing. Such an ordinary thing. And yet, it has given me more pleasure than I can say. Bora looked back at Shin, and his eyes held no judgment, only a great gentleness. I will miss the feeling of tiredness after a day of honest work. The ache in my muscles that tells me I have done something real. I will miss the kindness of strangers and the patience of friends. I will miss the sound of the wind and the feeling of the sun on my face. I will miss breathing. I will miss being here at all. The room was silent except for the faint sounds of the harbor below, the distant calls of gulls, the creaking of ships. Shin felt something crack open in his chest. It was not painful exactly, but it was not comfortable either. It was as though a shell he had not known he was wearing had suddenly broken. This man who owned nothing could list 100 things he would miss. And Shin, who owned everything, could not name one. How is this possible? Shin asked. His voice came out rough, almost a whisper. You have nothing. I have everything. And yet you are rich and I am poor. Bora was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the light was beginning to fade, the gold turning to amber. You have collected many things, he said finally. Beautiful things, valuable things. But you have not experienced them. You have let life pass through your hands like water, always reaching for the next thing, never holding what was already there. You have been so busy acquiring that you have forgotten to live. He gestured around the small room with one thin hand. I have little, but I have tasted every moment of it. I have been here, really here, for my life. That is the only wealth that matters. That is the only wealth we can keep. Shin left the room without speaking. He walked through his beautiful house, through rooms filled with treasures he had barely looked at in years. He went to his garden, where the last light was fading from the sky, and he sat on a stone bench until darkness fell. For the first time in longer than he could remember, he was not thinking about tomorrow. He was not planning or calculating or worrying. He was just sitting, just looking, just being there. He heard the wind move through the trees. He smelled the dampness of the evening air. He felt the stone bench beneath him, cool and solid and real. And he began, slowly, to understand what he had been missing. He had been so busy acquiring that he had forgotten to live. He had assumed there would always be more time, more chances, more years to finally appreciate what he had. But the years had passed, and he had appreciated nothing. He had traded his life for things, and the things had given him nothing in return. In the weeks that followed, Shin changed. Not dramatically, not in ways that others would easily notice, but he began to taste his food, really taste it. The salt and the sweet and the complex flavors he had been swallowing without attention. He began to watch the sunset without thinking of business, letting the colors fill his eyes and his mind. He began to hold the jade he had bought so many years ago, feeling its coolness, its smoothness, its weight in his palm. He began to listen to the children playing outside his walls. He began to notice the way the light moved through his house at different times of day. He began to feel the texture of his days rather than rushing through them. When people asked what had happened to him, he would only say that an old servant had asked him a question he could not answer, and that in the silence of not knowing, he had finally begun to learn. This story shows us something that Zen has always understood. The richness of life does not depend on what we have. It depends on whether we are truly present for what we have. We can possess the whole world and experience none of it. Or we can have almost nothing and taste every moment fully. The Great Matter asks us a simple question. Are we really here for this life? Or are we sleepwalking through it, assuming we will wake up and appreciate it later? Buddhism teaches that this human life is extraordinarily precious, not because we are special, but because this is our chance. This is our opportunity to be awake, to love, to grow, to experience the mystery of being alive. When we truly feel this, we stop wasting time on what does not matter. We stop postponing our presence for some imaginary future. The old servant Bora understood something his wealthy master did not. He understood that life is not measured by what we accumulate, but by what we actually experience. He understood that awareness itself is the greatest treasure, and that it is available to anyone, rich or poor, who stops long enough to receive it. Let us explore another story about the preciousness of life. In a village known for its plum orchards, there lived a woman named Mira who was always rushing. She had a husband and 3 children and a small business selling cloth, and there was never enough time for everything. She woke before dawn to prepare rice and mend torn clothes. She spent her days at the market, bargaining with customers, keeping accounts, managing the endless details of buying and selling. She fell into bed exhausted each night, and the days blurred together like water running downstream. Mira was not unhappy exactly. She loved her family. She took pride in her work. But there was a constant pressure in her chest, a feeling of always being behind, always having more to do than hours to do it. She moved through her life at a run, and she could not remember the last time she had simply been still. Next to Mira's house, separated by a low wooden fence, lived an elderly woman named Cho. Cho had lost her husband many years ago, and her children had grown and moved to distant towns. She lived alone in her small house with a garden that she tended with great care. In the center of the garden stood a single plum tree, old and gnarled, its branches spreading wide. Every morning, Mira would rush past Cho's garden on her way to the market, her arms full of cloth, her mind already racing through the day's tasks. And every morning, Cho would be there, sitting on a wooden bench beneath the plum tree, doing what seemed to Mira like nothing at all. "Good morning, Cho," Mira would call as she hurried by, barely slowing her pace. "Good morning, Mira," Cho would answer, her voice calm and unhurried. But by the time they were hungry, there was cloth that needed mending before tomorrow's market. There was always something. But something in Cho's face stopped her. A quiet earnestness, a patience that seemed to ask for very little. "Just for a moment," Mira said. They walked together through the gate and into Cho's garden. The plum tree stood in the center, its white blossoms luminous in the fading light, almost glowing against the darkening sky. The scent was stronger here, sweet and faintly bitter, filling the air. They sat together on the wooden bench. Mira's body was tense, her mind still running through lists of things undone. But she sat. For a while, neither of them spoke. The evening settled around them. Somewhere in the village, a dog barked. The breeze moved through the branches, and a few petals drifted down like snow. "This may be my last spring," Cho said. Her voice was matter-of-fact, without sadness or self-pity. Mira turned to her, alarmed. "Are you ill? Should I call for the healer?" Cho smiled and shook her head. "No, I am not ill, but I am old. 78 years old this year, and one of these springs will be my last. I have stopped assuming there will always be another." She looked up at the blossoms, her face soft in the dim light. "When I was your age, I rushed past everything, just as you do. I thought the blossoms would always return. I thought there would always be more time to sit and look at them. And then one day I realized that I had let 40 springs go by without ever really seeing one. 40 years of blossoms coming and going, and I had missed them all." Mira was quiet. She felt the bench beneath her, the cool evening air on her skin. She looked at the tree, really looked at it, for the first time since she could not remember when. The blossoms seemed different somehow, more vivid, more present. She noticed how each cluster of white petals trembled slightly in the breeze. She noticed the way the last light caught their edges, making them glow. She noticed the dark branches beneath, the texture of the bark, the way the tree had grown around its own history. "I see the same tree I have always seen," Mira said slowly. "But sometimes it looks different. It is not the tree that has changed. It is your looking. When we know something will not last, we see it more clearly. When we stop taking it for granted, it reveals itself." Cho reached out and took Mira's hand. Her fingers were thin and cool, the skin soft and papery with age. "I do not tell you this to frighten you. I tell you because I wish someone had told me sooner. You are rushing through your days as if there will always be more. And there will be more. For a while. But each day is like these blossoms. It will come once and never return. You can rush past it, or you can stop and see how beautiful it is." Mira sat with the old woman until the light was completely gone, and the blossoms were only pale shapes against the dark sky. The stars came out one by one. The air grew cooler, and still they sat. Mira did not think about dinner or the cloth or the children waiting. Something had loosened in her chest, some knot she had not known she was carrying. She just sat and looked and breathed. When she finally rose to leave, she felt different. She could not have named it exactly. It was as if a thin wall of glass between herself and the world had cracked, and she could feel things more directly than before. "Thank you," she said to Cho. "I am not sure what you have given me, but thank you." Cho smiled in the darkness. "I have only reminded you of what you already knew. What we all know, but keep forgetting. In the days that followed, Mira still worked hard. She still cared for her family and tended her business. The demands of life did not disappear, but she began to pause more often. She would stop in the middle of kneading bread to feel the texture of the dough against her palms. She would look up from her sewing to watch the light move across the floor. She would touch her children's faces for no reason, just to feel them there, warm and alive and present. Her husband noticed the change. "You seem different lately," he said one evening as they sat together after the children had gone to sleep. "More here somehow. Less far away." Mira nodded. "An old woman reminded me that I will not have this forever. It is strange. Knowing that has not made me sad. It has made everything more beautiful." The plum blossoms fell, as they always do. The white petals drifted down over several days, covering the ground like snow, then browning and returning to the earth. Summer came, then autumn, then winter. Cho passed away 2 winters later, quietly, in her sleep, when the plum tree was bare and the garden was white with real snow. Mira was one of the first to know. She stood in the empty garden and looked at the tree and cried. But the tears were not only grief, they were also gratitude. What Cho had given her remained. The understanding that preciousness and impermanence are woven together. That life becomes most vivid when we stop taking it for granted. That seeing clearly is simply a matter of remembering what we already know, but keep forgetting. Mira tended Cho's garden after that, keeping the plum tree healthy and strong. And every spring, when the blossoms came, she would sit on the wooden bench and look at them, really look at them, the way Cho had taught her. And sometimes, other villagers would stop by the fence, rushing past on their way to somewhere important, and Mira would invite them to sit for a moment. "Just for a moment," she would say, "before the light is gone." Zen teaches that awareness of impermanence is not meant to create anxiety or sorrow. It is meant to wake us up. When we truly understand that this moment will never come again, we stop throwing moments away. We start receiving them as the gifts they are. The Buddha often reminded his students to contemplate the fleeting nature of life, not as a morbid exercise, but as a way of cutting through the fog of assumption. We assume we will have tomorrow. We assume the people we love will always be here. We assume there will be time later to appreciate what we have now. And these assumptions put us to sleep. The great matter wakes us up. It says clearly and simply, this is it. This moment, this breath, this life. It is happening now, and it will not happen forever. What will you do with it? This is not a frightening question when we truly hear it. It is an invitation to stop postponing and start living. An invitation to taste our food, to feel the air on our skin, to look into the eyes of those we love, as if seeing them for the first time. Because in truth, every time is the first time, and every time could be the last. Take a slow breath now and let it go gently. Feel the simple fact of being here, of being aware, of being alive in this moment. There is nothing else you need to do. Just rest in the preciousness of this breath. Most of us spend our lives running from the thought of death. We push it away, distract ourselves, pretend it applies to others but not to us. This is natural. The mind does not want to look at what frightens it. But Zen takes a different approach. It suggests that facing mortality directly is one of the most powerful practices for awakening. Not because it is pleasant, but because it cuts through confusion like nothing else can. When we truly contemplate the fact that we will die, much of what seemed important suddenly reveals itself as trivial. And much of what we ignored or postponed suddenly reveals itself as essential. This is why Zen monasteries have traditionally encouraged students to meditate on death. Not to create fear or morbidity, but to clarify the mind. When we stop running from the truth of our mortality, we discover something unexpected. We become more alive, not less. The fog of distraction lifts. We see clearly what matters and what does not. The great matter uses death as a teacher. It asks us to let the reality of our impermanence instruct us in how to live. What would we do differently if we truly knew our time was limited? What would we stop wasting energy on? What would we finally say, finally do, finally become? These are not morbid questions. They are liberating ones. They cut through the endless postponement that keeps us from living fully. They wake us up from the trance of assuming we have forever. Let us explore a story about a young monk who was sent to face his deepest fear and what he discovered in the darkness. In a monastery high in the mountains, where the air was thin and cold and the stars at night seemed close enough to touch, there lived a young monk named Kay, who was afraid of death. This was not unusual. Many people fear death. But Kay's fear was particularly strong, a constant shadow that followed him through his days and invaded his dreams at night. He had come to the monastery hoping to find peace. He had heard that the monks there had discovered something that made them unafraid. Some secret understanding that allowed them to face mortality with calm acceptance. He wanted to learn this secret. He wanted to be free from the fear that gripped his heart whenever he thought about the end of his life. For 3 years, Kay practiced diligently. He meditated for hours each day. He studied the ancient texts. He listened carefully to every teaching. And yet the fear remained. If anything, it grew stronger. The more he practiced, the more aware he became of how precious life was, and the more terrified he became of losing it. His teacher was an old monk named Wen, who had lived in the monastery for over 50 years. Wen was known for his unusual teaching methods. He rarely explained things directly. Instead, he would give his students tasks or challenges that forced them to discover the truth for themselves. One autumn evening, as the leaves were turning gold and red on the mountainside, Kay went to Wen's small room and knelt before him. "Teacher," he said, "I have been here for 3 years. I have practiced everything you have taught me, but I am still afraid of death. The fear is always with me. Sometimes I cannot sleep because of it. Sometimes I cannot focus on my meditation because thoughts of dying intrude. Please, tell me the secret. How do I become free from this fear?" Wen was silent for a long moment. He sat very still, his eyes half closed, his breath barely visible. The evening light came through the small window and fell across his weathered face. "You want me to give you words?" he said finally. "You want me to explain something that will make the fear go away. But words cannot do this. Understanding cannot do this. Only experience can do this." "Then give me an experience," Kay said. "I will do anything." Wen opened his eyes fully and looked at the young monk. "Anything?" "Anything." "Very well. Tomorrow night, you will go to the old graveyard at the bottom of the mountain. You will go alone, after dark, and you will stay there until dawn. You will not bring a lamp or a candle. You will sit among the graves in complete darkness, and you will not leave until the sun rises. Kay felt his stomach tighten. The old graveyard was a place the monks rarely visited. It was overgrown and neglected, filled with the remains of villagers who had died over many generations. Even in daylight, it had an atmosphere of heaviness and decay. The thought of spending an entire night there, alone, in the dark, made his fear rise up like a wave. "Teacher," he said, his voice unsteady, "I do not think I can do this." Wen nodded slowly. "I know. That is why you must." The next day passed in a blur of dread. Kay tried to meditate, but his mind kept returning to what awaited him. He tried to eat, but the food had no taste. He tried to find reasons to delay, to ask for more time, but he knew that Wen would not relent. As darkness fell, Kay made his way down the mountain path. The moon was new, and the night was very dark. He could barely see the path beneath his feet. The sounds of the forest surrounded him, rustling leaves, the calls of night birds, the distant howl of something he could not identify. The graveyard appeared before him as a darker shape against the darkness. Old stone markers rose from the ground at odd angles, some toppled, some leaning, all of them worn smooth by centuries of rain and wind. The grass was tall and wild. The smell of earth and decay hung in the air. Kay stood at the entrance, unable to move forward. Every part of his body told him to run, to go back to the safety of the monastery, to forget this foolish task. But he thought of Wen's calm eyes, and he knew that running would solve nothing. The fear would still be there, waiting for him, growing stronger with each avoidance. He stepped into the graveyard. The ground beneath his feet was uneven, softened by years of fallen leaves and neglect. He moved slowly, his hands stretched out before him, feeling the air for obstacles. His fingers brushed against cold stone, a grave marker worn smooth by time. He pulled his hand back as if burned, then forced himself to touch it again. Just stone. Just the memory of someone who had lived and died long before he was born. The darkness was absolute. He could not see his own hands in front of his face. He moved slowly, carefully, feeling his way between the grave markers until he found a small, clear space. He lowered himself to the ground and sat, cross-legged, surrounded by the dead. For the first hour, the fear was almost unbearable. His heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. Every sound made him flinch. A branch cracking, the rustle of an animal in the grass, the settling of old stones. His imagination filled the darkness with terrors, with ghosts and spirits and nameless things reaching for him. He wanted to scream. He wanted to run. He wanted to be anywhere but here. But he stayed. He sat with the fear, letting it wash over him, letting it fill every part of his body. He did not fight it. He did not try to make it go away. He simply sat with it, as Wen had taught him to sit with everything, observing it, feeling it, letting it be. And then, somewhere in the second hour, something began to shift. The fear was still there, but it was no longer the only thing. Kay began to notice other things. The coolness of the night air on his skin, the texture of the grass beneath him, the smell of the earth, rich and complex. The sounds of the night, which were not threatening after all, but simply the sounds of life continuing in the darkness. He was surrounded by the dead, and yet he was intensely, vividly alive. His senses were sharper than they had ever been. Every breath felt precious. Every heartbeat felt like a miracle. The darkness that had seemed so terrifying now felt almost peaceful, a great quiet holding him. He thought about the people buried around him. They had once been alive just as he was alive. They had breathed this same mountain air, had looked up at these same stars, had felt the same fears and hopes that he felt. And now they were gone, returned to the earth, their lives completed. But they had lived. That was the thing. They had been here, had experienced this strange and beautiful existence, had loved and struggled and grown. And now it was his turn. He was the one who was alive. He was the one who could feel the cool air and hear the night sounds and breathe in the smell of the living world. The fear did not disappear entirely, but it changed. It became something else, something almost like gratitude. He was alive. Right now, in this moment, he was alive. And that was not something to fear. That was something to marvel at. As the first grey light of dawn began to appear over the mountains, presence. It was being fully here, fully alive, for whatever time remained. He walked back up the mountain as the sun rose, painting the peaks in shades of gold and pink. The monastery looked different to him now. The trees looked different. The faces of the other monks looked different. Everything seemed precious and temporary and beautiful. He went to Wen's room and knelt before him. "Well?" Wen asked. "I am still going to die," Kay said. "Nothing has changed about that." "No, nothing has changed about that. But something has changed in me. I spent the night surrounded by death, and I have never felt more alive. I was so afraid of dying that I was not living. I was so busy running from death that I was missing life." Wen nodded slowly, a small smile crossing his face. "And now?" Kay thought for a moment. "Now I am not as afraid. Not because death seems smaller, but because life seems larger. I was given this time, this breath, this awareness. That is not something to fear losing. That is something to treasure having." "Good," Wen said. "Now your real practice can begin." Kay lived in the monastery for many more years. He became a teacher himself, known for his calm presence and his gentle way of guiding students. When young monks came to him with their fears, he would listen patiently. And sometimes, when he sensed they were ready, he would tell them about the night in the graveyard. "You cannot think your way past death," he would say. "You cannot meditate it away or study it into submission. You must meet it. You must sit with it in the darkness until you discover what is on the other side of the fear." "And what was on the other side?" they would ask. "Life," he would say. "The most vivid, precious, extraordinary life you have ever experienced. That is what death teaches us, if we let it." This story shows us how Zen uses death as a teacher. Kay could not think his way out of his fear. He could not study or meditate his way to freedom. He had to face the reality directly, to sit in the darkness with the dead, before he could discover what was on the other side of his terror. What he found was not what he expected. He found that awareness of death truly felt does not diminish life. It illuminates life. It makes every moment more vivid, more precious, more worthy of attention. The monks who seemed so calm in the face of mortality were not ignoring death. They were using it to remind themselves how remarkable it is to be alive at all. Buddhism teaches that we suffer because we cling to things that cannot last. We want life to be permanent, and it is not. But the solution is not to despair. It is to appreciate what we have while we have it. The flower is beautiful, not despite its fading, but in some way because of it. Life is precious, not despite its brevity, but because of it. The Great Matter invites us to stop running from this truth and to let it teach us instead. Let your breath slow now and feel your body soften. There is nothing to pretend in this moment, nothing to hide. Simply rest in the truth of being here, being yourself, being alive. The Great Matter creates a kind of urgency in us, not the frantic rushing that fills so many of our days, not the anxious hurrying from task to task. This is a different kind of urgency. It is a calm, clear determination not to waste this precious life on postponement. When we truly understand that our time is limited, we stop waiting for conditions to be perfect. We stop telling ourselves that we will live fully later, when things settle down, when circumstances improve, when we finally have what we need. We recognize that later may never come, and that the only moment we can ever live is this one. Zen speaks of this as great urgency without rushing. It is the focused attention of someone who knows their time is precious. Not panicked, not anxious, but fully present. Every moment becomes worthy of attention because every moment is irreplaceable. Most of us live in a kind of trance of postponement. We put off joy until our problems are solved. We delay presence until we are less busy. We save our full attention for some imaginary future when we will finally be ready to receive it. But that future never arrives. There is only now, appearing again and again, and we keep missing it because we are waiting for something else. The Great Matter cuts through this trance. It says simply, this is your life. It is happening now, not later. Now, what are you waiting for? Let us explore a story about a farmer who spent his life waiting for conditions to improve, and what a stranger helped him see. In a farming village that lay in the curve of a wide valley, there lived a man named Ko, who had spent most of his years waiting. He was a good farmer, hard-working and careful, but he had never learned to enjoy the work. For Ko, farming was a series of problems to be solved, obstacles to be overcome, conditions to be endured until things got better. And things were always about to get better. Next season, the rains would come at the right time. Next year, the harvest would be plentiful enough to pay off his debts. Next spring, he would finally have the time and money to fix the leak in his roof, to buy his wife the cloth she wanted, to take his children to the festival in the distant town. But next season brought its own problems. Next year brought new debts to replace the old ones. And the roof still leaked, and his wife still wore her old clothes, and his children had never been to the festival. Ko was not an unhappy man exactly. He did not complain more than anyone else. But there was a tightness in his face, a tension around his eyes that never quite relaxed. He carried the weight of waiting like a stone in his chest, always looking ahead to the relief that never came. One summer, the rains did not come at all. Week after week, drooped. Ko walked through his fields each morning, looking up at the empty sky, feeling the familiar tightness in his chest grow heavier. He could not enjoy anything while the drought continued. His wife prepared meals, and he ate without tasting. His children laughed and played, and he did not hear them. The summer evenings were warm and soft, filled with the sounds of crickets and the glow of fireflies, and Ko noticed none of it. He was too busy waiting for rain. One evening, as the sun was setting and the dry fields stretched out golden and brittle in the fading light, a traveler appeared on the road that ran past Ko's farm. She was a nun, dressed in simple grey robes, with a walking staff in her hand and a calm expression on her weathered face. Her name was Lena, and she had been walking for many years, stopping at villages and farms, offering teachings in exchange for food and shelter. Ko was sitting on a wooden bench outside his house, staring at the sky, when she approached. "Good evening," Lena said. "I am traveling through and looking for a place to rest for the night. May I sleep in your barn? I will not trouble you for more than a roof." Ko barely glanced at her. "You may sleep in the barn, but I cannot offer you food. We have little enough for ourselves. The rains have not come." "I see." Lena looked out at the dry fields. "It has been a difficult season." "It is always a difficult season. If it is not drought, it is flood. If it is not flood, it is insects. If it is not insects, it is the price at market falling just when I have something to sell." Ko's voice was flat, reciting a familiar litany. "I keep waiting for a good year. It never comes." Lena was quiet for a moment. She leaned on her staff and looked at the fields, then at the sky, then at Ko's tight, tired face. "May I sit with you for a moment?" Ko shrugged. He did not particularly want company, but he was too weary to refuse. Lena sat on the bench beside him. The sunset was turning the western sky deep orange and pink, and the first stars were appearing in the east. A warm breeze moved through the dry grass, making a soft rustling sound. "It is a beautiful evening," Lena said. Ko made a dismissive noise. "What is beautiful about it?" "The crops are dying. The well is running low. By this time next month, I may have nothing left to harvest. And yet the sunset is still beautiful, is it not? The colors are the same whether the crops live or die." Ko turned to look at her, irritation rising in his chest. "What use is a beautiful sunset if my family goes hungry? Perhaps no use at all," Lena said calmly. "But I did not ask about use. I asked about beauty. I asked whether this moment, right now, with the sky painted in those colors, and the breeze warm on your face, and the stars beginning to appear, I asked whether this moment is beautiful. And I think it is. Do you not think it is?" Ko looked at the sky. He had not really looked at it in weeks, maybe months. He had been too busy looking for rain clouds, checking the horizon for signs of moisture, scanning for anything that might solve his problem. Now he looked at the sky as it actually was, and he saw the deep oranges fading into purple, the first bright stars, like holes in dark fabric, the soft glow of twilight spreading across the valley. It was beautiful. He could not deny it. "What does it matter if it is beautiful?" he said, but his voice was quieter now, less certain. "I cannot eat beauty. I cannot pay my debts with beauty. No, but you can experience beauty. You can receive it. You can let it enter you, even if just for a moment. Lena paused. Tell me, when the rains come and the crops grow and the harvest is good, will you be happy then? Of course. And what will you do with your happiness? Ko frowned. What do you mean? What will I do? I will be happy. I will enjoy my life. Will you? Or will you find something else to worry about? Will the price at market be too low? Will the winter be too harsh? Will there be something else standing between you and the happiness you are waiting for? Ko opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. He thought about the years behind him, the good seasons and the bad ones. Had he ever simply been happy? Had he ever stopped waiting for conditions to improve and simply enjoyed what he had? He could not remember a time. Even in the good years, there had always been something else to worry about. Some future problem casting its shadow over the present. You see it, Lena said gently. You see what you have been doing. I have been waiting, Ko said slowly. My whole life. I have been waiting for things to be right before I let myself be happy. But things are never right. There is always something wrong, something missing, something that needs to be fixed before I can enjoy what I have. And while you wait, life passes. This evening passes. This sunset passes. Your children grow up. Your wife grows old. The years flow by like water, and you miss all of it because you are looking at some imaginary future where everything is finally perfect. Ko felt something shift in his chest, the stone he had been carrying for so long moving slightly, loosening. He looked at the sunset again, really looked at it, and something in him softened. And if the rain never comes? He asked quietly. If the crops die and the well runs dry and everything falls apart, then that will happen. And you will have to deal with it. But you will deal with it then, not now. Right now, the sun is setting. Right now, the air is warm. Right now, you are alive, and the people you love are alive, and this moment will never come again. Lena stood, picking up her staff. I have met many people on my travels. The unhappiest ones are not those with the most problems. They are those who cannot stop waiting for life to be different than it is. They miss everything, waiting for something that never arrives. She began to walk toward the barn, then paused and looked back at him. The rain may come, or it may not. But this evening is here. Your wife is in that house. Your children are sleeping. The stars are appearing one by one. This is your life, Ko. Not the one you are waiting for. This one. Will you miss it too? She walked on, and Ko sat alone on the bench, watching the stars multiply in the darkening sky. Something had broken open in him. For the first time in longer than he could remember, he was not thinking about the rain. He was not worrying about the crops or the debts or the future. He was just sitting there, feeling the warm air on his skin, watching the light fade, being present for his own life. He went inside after a while. His wife was sitting by the small fire, mending clothes by the dim light. She looked up when he entered, expecting the usual tight expression, the distracted eyes. Instead, he sat down beside her and took her hand. I am sorry, he said. She looked at him with surprise. For what? For waiting. For always being somewhere else, worrying about something else. For missing so much. He looked around the small room, the worn furniture, the sleeping children in the corner. This is good. What we have is good. I have been too busy waiting for something better to see it. She squeezed his hand, and there were tears in her eyes, but she was smiling. The rain came eventually, as it always does. Some of the crops were saved, and some were lost. The next year had its own problems, as every year does. But something had changed in Co. He still worked hard. He still dealt with difficulties as they arose. But he stopped waiting. He stopped putting his life on hold until conditions improved. He watched sunsets now. He listened when his children spoke. He tasted his food and felt the seasons change, and noticed the small beauties that had always been there, hidden behind his waiting. And when people asked what had changed him, he would tell them about the nun who had appeared on a summer evening and asked him a simple question: "What are you waiting for?" Buddhism teaches that the present moment is the only moment we ever actually have. The past exists only as memory. The future exists only as imagination. All of our waiting for things to be different, all of our postponing of joy until conditions improve, is a way of missing the only life we will ever live. The great matter reminds us that our time is limited. We do not have forever to wait. The someday we keep hoping for may never arrive, and even if it does, we will have missed all the days in between. Zen does not ask us to ignore our problems or pretend that difficulties do not exist. It asks us to be present for our lives as they actually are, right now, in this moment. This is the urgency that the great matter creates. Not frantic rushing, but clear seeing. Not anxious hurrying, but calm presence. The recognition that this moment, whatever it contains, is our life. And we can receive it, or we can miss it while waiting for something else. Let us explore a story about a woman who kept meaning to write a letter, and what an old man helped her understand about the words we leave unspoken. In a town where the river curved sharply and the houses clustered along its banks, there lived a woman named Una who carried an unwritten letter in her heart. It had been there for nearly 10 years, growing heavier with each passing season, though she rarely spoke of it to anyone. The letter was for her sister, Ami. They had grown up in this same town, in a house that still stood on the northern edge of the river. They had been close as children, sharing secrets and dreams, sleeping side by side on their mat, promising each other that they would always be friends, no matter what. But something had happened when they were young women. A man had come between them, or perhaps it was money, or perhaps it was just the slow accumulation of misunderstandings that can poison even the deepest love. Una could barely remember now what the original argument had been about. It seemed so small, looking back, but the words that had been spoken were not small. They had been sharp and hard and meant to wound. Amy had left the town after that. She had married and moved far away, to a city that Una had never seen. They had not spoken since. 10 years of silence, growing deeper with each year that passed. Una thought about writing to her often. She would compose letters in her mind, late at night, when she could not sleep, imagining what she would say, how she would explain, how she would apologize. But when morning came, the task always seemed too difficult. The right words would not come. The timing was never right. She was too busy, or too tired, or too uncertain of how the letter would be received. And so the years passed. and the unwritten letter grew heavier in her heart. There was an old man in the town named Po, who had been a letter carrier for over 50 years. He had walked the same route since before Yuna was born, delivering messages from one house to another, carrying news of births and deaths and marriages and business deals. His back was bent now from all those years of walking with a heavy bag, and he moved slowly, but he still made his rounds every day. Yuna saw him often, passing by her house in the morning, and they would exchange greetings. She had known him all her life. He had delivered the letter from her husband when they were courting. He had delivered the notices of her parents' deaths. He had carried the news of her own children's births to relatives in other parts of the town. One autumn afternoon, Yuna was sitting outside her house, watching the leaves fall from the trees along the river. The air was cool and smelled of wood smoke. Po came walking slowly up the path, his bag hanging light and nearly empty at his side. He paused when he saw her. "Good afternoon, Yuna. You look troubled." Yuna managed a small smile. "Just thinking, Po. Nothing important." The old man studied her face with the keen attention of someone who had spent a lifetime observing people. "May I sit with you for a moment? My legs are not what they used to be." She gestured to the bench beside her, and he lowered himself carefully onto it, setting his bag on the ground with a sigh. 52 years, he said, looking out at the river. 52 years of carrying letters. Do you know what I have learned? Yuna shook her head. I have learned that the letters people regret most are not the ones they wrote badly. They are the ones they never wrote at all. Yuna felt her chest tighten. It was as if he had reached into her heart and touched the exact spot where the unwritten letter lived. I have carried many letters, Po continued. Love letters and business letters. Letters of apology and letters of congratulation. Letters that brought joy and letters that brought sorrow. But sometimes, when I visit people near the end of their lives, they do not talk. His old eyes kind but unflinching. There is someone you need to write to. I can see it in your face. I have seen it for years. Yuna felt tears prick at her eyes. My sister. We had a falling out a long time ago. I have been meaning to write to her, but I never know what to say. The words are never right. The timing is never right. The timing is never right, Po repeated softly. I have heard that many times. People wait for the perfect moment, the perfect words. They tell themselves they will write when they are less busy, when they have more clarity, when they feel ready. He shook his head. The perfect moment never comes. The words are never exactly right. And while people wait, time passes. Sometimes too much time. What if she does not want to hear from me? What if she has forgotten me? Or worse, what if she hates me still? Then you will know. And knowing is better than wondering. The weight you carry now, that unwritten letter in your heart, it will only grow heavier. I have seen what happens to people who carry such weights for too long. The words they meant to say become stones they cannot put down. He reached into his bag and pulled out a blank piece of paper and a small brush and ink stone. I carry these for myself, for the notes I must make on my rounds. But today, I think you need them more than I do. He placed them in her hands, his fingers rough and worn from years of work. Write the letter. Not the perfect letter, just a letter. Say what is in your heart, even if the words are clumsy. Say that you are sorry. If you are sorry, Say that you miss her, if you miss her. Say that you want to try again, if you want to try again. He paused. The words do not have to be perfect. They just have to be true. And if she does not answer, then you will have said what needed to be said. The rest is not in your hands, but at least you will not spend the rest of your life wondering what might have happened if you had only found the courage to reach out. Poe rose slowly from the bench, picking up his bag. The afternoon light was growing golden, and the leaves continued to fall, drifting lazily toward the river. I have carried many letters over the years, he said. But the ones that mattered most were not the cleverest or the most beautiful. They were the ones that were honest. They were the ones that someone was brave enough to send, even though they were not perfect. He began to walk away, then paused and looked back at her. We do not have as much time as we think we do, Una. None of us do. The letters we mean to write, the words we mean to say, they cannot wait forever. Write the letter tonight. Tomorrow is not promised to anyone. Una sat for a long while after he left, holding the paper and ink in her lap. The sun set, and the stars came out, and still she sat there, feeling the weight of 10 years of silence. And then, in the quiet of the evening, she went inside and lit a lamp and began to write. The letter was not perfect. The words were clumsy in places. She crossed out lines and started again. She did not know if it would be well received or thrown away unread. But she wrote it anyway, saying what was true, saying what she had carried in her heart for so long. She gave it to Poe the next morning, and he tucked it into his bag with a nod and a small smile. The reply came 3 weeks later. Amy had not forgotten her. Amy had not stopped loving her. Amy had been waiting too, carrying her own unwritten letter, held back by the same fears and doubts. They wrote back and forth through the winter, and in the spring, Amy came to visit. They sat by the river where they had played as children, 2 women with grey in their hair now, and they talked about what had happened and what had been lost and what might still be found. I almost did not write, Una said. I almost let another year go by, and another, and another. I know, Amy said. I almost did not answer. I was afraid it was too late, that too much time had passed. An old letter carrier told me that the words did not have to be perfect. They just had to be true. Amy took her sister's hand. He was right. They were not perfect, but they were enough. They were more than enough. Zen teaches us that action in the present moment is more valuable than perfect action that never comes. We can spend our entire lives preparing, waiting, refining, hoping for the right conditions, and miss the opportunity that was available to us all along. The great matter reminds us that time is passing. The people we love are here now, but they will not be here forever. The words we need to say will not say themselves. The reconciliations we hope for will not happen without us taking a step. And every day we postpone is a day we cannot get back. This is not about rushing or acting carelessly. It is about recognizing that the perfect moment we are waiting for may never arrive. The imperfect moment we are in right now is the only moment we have. Better to reach out clumsily than to never reach out at all. Better to say the imperfect words than to leave them forever unspoken. The Buddha taught his students that this human life is precious and brief. We do not know how much time we have. We do not know how much time the people we love have. The great matter asks us to act on this knowledge, to stop postponing what matters most, to live as if our time is limited, because it is. Let your body relax now and allow your breath to deepen. Whatever words you have been holding back, whatever actions you have been postponing, let them rest for this moment. Simply be here, in the quiet of this breath, knowing that presence is always available to you. There is an old Zen saying that points to the heart of practice: die before you die and discover there is no death. This sounds strange at first, perhaps even morbid. Done. No words are left unspoken. No love is left unexpressed. No life is left unlived. Most of us carry regrets. We look back at choices we made and wonder what would have happened if we had chosen differently. We remember words we said that we wish we could take back, and words we never said that we wish we had spoken. We think about paths not taken, opportunities missed, moments when we held back instead of reaching out. The great matter invites us to live in a way that minimizes these regrets. Not by making perfect choices, because there are no perfect choices, but by making our choices fully, living them completely, being present for the life we actually have, rather than mourning the life we imagine we might have had. Regret comes not from making the wrong choice. It comes from living our choices only halfway, from never fully committing to the path we are on because we are too busy looking at the paths we did not take. When we embrace our actual life, with all its imperfections and limitations, regret begins to dissolve. We discover that any path, walked fully, leads to the same place. Let us explore a story about a man who spent his life regretting a choice he had made, and what he learned from meeting someone who had made the opposite choice. In a town where two roads met at a crossroads, there lived a man named Tal who had built a quiet life for himself. He had a small shop where he sold cloth and thread. He had a wife who had grown old beside him, and children who had grown up and moved to nearby villages. His days were orderly and predictable, shaped by the rhythm of opening the shop each morning and closing it each evening, of meals taken at the same times, of seasons turning in their familiar patterns. From the outside, Tal's life looked peaceful, but inside, he carried a weight that no one else could see. When Tal was a young man, barely 20 years old, he had stood at a crossroads, much like the one in the center of his town. Not a physical crossroads, but a moment of choice that would shape everything that followed. He had been offered a chance to join a trading expedition that would travel to distant lands, to see places he had only heard about in stories, to live a life of adventure and uncertainty and possibility. But he had also been courting a young woman, the woman who would become his wife. And his father's shop needed someone to run it, and his mother was not well, and there were so many reasons to stay. He had chosen to stay. He had married the woman, taken over the shop, cared for his mother until she died. He had raised his children in the same house where he had been raised, teaching them the same trade his father had taught him. He had done what was expected of him, what seemed responsible and right, and in many ways, it had been a good life. His wife was kind and patient. His children had grown into decent people. The shop provided enough to live on, and his neighbors respected him. There was nothing wrong with the life he had built, and yet, for 40 years, he had wondered, what would his life have been if he had gone? What would he have seen? Who would he have become? What adventures would he have lived? The question haunted him, one he had not lived. He never spoke of this to anyone. His wife did not know. His children did not know. It was his private burden, a secret regret that colored everything with a faint shade of gray. One autumn, a traveler came to town. He was an old man, weathered by years of sun and wind, with the look of someone who had spent his life on the road. His clothes were worn but well made, and he carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who was at home anywhere. His name was Rio, and he had been a merchant who traveled the trade routes for over 40 years. He had seen the distant lands that Tal had only dreamed of. He had lived the life of adventure that Tal had turned away from all those years ago. Ron came into Tal's shop looking for thread to mend his traveling clothes. They began to talk, as strangers sometimes do, about small things at first, and then about larger things. Where Ron had been, what he had seen, the places that existed beyond the horizon. Tal listened with a hunger he could not hide. This was the life he had not lived, standing before him, speaking of wonders he had never seen. "You have been everywhere," Tal said, and he could hear the longing in his own voice. "You have seen everything." Ron smiled, but there was something complicated in the smile, something that was not quite happiness. "I have seen many things," he agreed. "Mountains that touch the sky, rivers wider than any in this land, cities so large you could walk for days without reaching the edge, markets where they sell fruits and spices you cannot imagine." "It sounds wonderful," Tal said. "It sounds like the life I should have lived." Ron looked at him for a long moment, his eyes thoughtful. "Should have lived? Tell me what you mean." And so Tal told him. He told him about the choice he had made 40 years ago, about the expedition he had turned down, about the life of adventure he had given up for the life of responsibility. He told him about the regret he had carried all these years, the feeling that he had made the wrong choice, that his real life was somewhere else, unlived. When he finished, Ron was quiet for a long time. He sat down on a stool near the counter, his mending forgotten in his lap. "I need to tell you something," Ron said finally, "and I'm not sure you will want to hear it." "Tell me." "I have spent my life on the road. I have seen the wonders I described, and many more besides. I have had adventures that would fill 100 evenings of storytelling." He paused, and his weathered face looked suddenly tired. "And I have regrets too. Many regrets. Perhaps more than you." Tal stared at him. "How can that be? You lived the life I only dreamed of." "I lived a life, but I did not live it fully. I was always moving, always looking at the next horizon, always chasing something I never quite caught. I saw the mountains, yes, but I did not stay to watch the seasons change on them. I saw the great rivers, but I did not learn the names of the people who lived beside them. I was always passing through." He looked around the small shop, at the neat shelves of cloth and thread, at the worn wooden counter, at the afternoon light coming through the window. "I never had a shop like this, where people knew my name and came back year after year. I never had a wife who grew old beside me, learning all my moods and fears and hopes. I never had children who carry something of me into the future." His voice grew quieter. "I never had a home. I had 1,000 places to sleep, but never a home." Tal felt something shifting in his chest, the old weight moving in a way he did not expect. "But you chose adventure," he said. "You chose freedom. You must not have wanted those things. I told myself that. For many years, I told myself that I had chosen the better path, that people like you, who stayed in one place, were missing the real life, the larger life. Ron shook his head slowly. But I was missing things too. I was missing the depth that comes from staying. I was missing the roots that grow when you remain in one place long enough for them to take hold. He leaned forward, his eyes holding Tal's. Do you want to know what I have learned after all these years of traveling? Yes. The path does not matter. Any path, lived fully, leads to the same place. What matters is not which road you take, but how you walk it. I walked my road halfway, always looking at the roads I did not take. And you, I think, have done the same. We have both missed our lives, not because we chose wrong, but because we never stopped regretting our choice long enough to fully live it. The words hung in the air of the small shop. Outside, the afternoon was fading toward evening. The sounds of the town drifted in, familiar sounds that Tal had heard for 40 years without really hearing. I have wasted so much time, Tal said slowly. So many years wishing I was somewhere else. As have I. Wishing I had what you have. Roots. Belonging. A place where people know me. Ron smiled, and this time the smile was gentler, sadder. We are fools, both of us. We each had a life, and we spent it longing for the others. They sat together in silence as the light changed and the evening came on. Two old men who had made opposite choices and arrived at the same place, a recognition that the choice itself had never been the problem. The problem was the failure to fully embrace whatever choice was made. Tal walked home that evening through streets he had walked 10,000 times. The evening light fell on the old stone, the way the trees had grown over the years, the faces of neighbors he had known his whole life. This was his life. Not the one he had imagined, not the one he had regretted not living, but this one. These streets. These people. This small shop, this wife who knew him, these children who carried him forward. He had been given a life, and he had spent 40 years wishing it was a different one. But there was still time. Not as much as before, but some. Enough to stop regretting and start living. Enough to walk the path he had chosen, fully, for whatever years remained. When he got home, his wife looked up from her sewing and smiled at him. The same smile she had given him for 40 years. You look different, she said. What happened? I met someone who showed me something I should have seen a long time ago. What did he show you? Tal sat down beside her and took her hand. Her fingers were thin and worn, familiar as his own. He showed me that I have been living the wrong way. Not the wrong life, just the wrong way. I have been here with you for 40 years, but part of me was always somewhere else, living some other life in my imagination. He squeezed her hand gently. I am sorry for that. You are here now, she said. Yes, I am here now. And in the years that followed, Tal found that it was not too late after all. Not too late to notice the beauty of his ordinary life, to appreciate the woman who had shared it with him, to feel the ground beneath his feet, instead of always longing for distant horizons. The regret did not disappear entirely. It had been his companion for too long to vanish overnight. But it grew quieter, less insistent, more like an old scar than an open wound. When Tal finally died, many years later, he died at peace. Not because his life had been extraordinary, but because he had finally allowed himself to fully live the ordinary life he had been given. We often believe that our unhappiness comes from making the wrong choice somewhere in our past. If only we had taken the other path, we tell ourselves, everything would be different. Everything would be better. But Zen teaches us that the path itself is not the problem. The problem is our failure to commit fully to whatever path we are on. When we walk through life looking backward at roads not taken, we cannot see the road beneath our feet. We miss the life we are actually living while mourning the life we imagine we might have had. The great matter invites us to make peace with our choices, not because they were perfect, but because they are ours. Every choice closes some doors and opens others. Every path has its gifts and its limitations. The question is not whether we chose correctly. The question is whether we are willing to be fully present for the life that our choices have created. Let us explore a story about a woman who carried guilt for words she never spoke, and what she discovered about the many ways that love can be expressed. In a village where the hills rose green and gentle toward the distant mountains, there lived a woman named Sora who carried a stone of guilt in her heart. It had been there for 5 years now, since the morning her father died, and it showed no signs of growing lighter. Her father had been a quiet man, a woodcutter who spent his days in the forest and his evenings by the fire, speaking little but always present. Sora had loved him deeply, but she had never told him so. In her family, such things were not said directly. Love was shown through actions, through the food prepared and the clothes mended and the work shared. Words of affection were rare, almost embarrassing. When her father grew ill, Sora had tended to him carefully. She had prepared his food, washed his clothes, sat beside him through long nights when the fever made him restless. She had done everything she could think of to show her love, but she had never said it. She had never spoken the words that now haunted her. I love you. Thank you for everything. You were a good father. He had died on a quiet morning while she was in the other room preparing tea. By the time she returned, he was gone. The words she had meant to say remained unspoken, locked inside her forever. For 5 years, Sora had carried this guilt. She should have said something. She should have found the courage to speak what was in her heart. Now it was too late, and she would never have another chance. She spoke of this to no one. It was her private burden, her secret shame. She went about her days caring for her mother, managing the household, doing what needed to be done. But the stone in her heart never grew lighter. One spring, an old woman came to the village. Her name was Mina, and she had known Sora's father long ago, when they were both young. She had moved away many years past to a town on the other side of the mountains, but she had heard of his death and had come to pay her respects and visit his grave. Sora offered her hospitality, as was proper. She prepared food and tea, and they sat together in the small house where Sora had grown up, surrounded by the familiar objects of her father's life. His wood-cutting tools still hung on the wall. His chair still sat by the fire, empty now but somehow still holding the shape of him. Mina was a small woman with white hair and kind eyes. She looked around the room slowly, taking in each object, each detail. "He was a good man, your father," she said. "We grew up together, did you know that? We played in these same hills as children." "He never spoke of his childhood," Sora said. He rarely spoke of anything. No, he would not have. He was always quiet, even as a boy. I wish I had told him that. I wish I had told him many things. Mina looked at her with gentle attention. What things? And so, Sora told her. She told her about the words she had never spoken, the love she had never expressed, the guilt she had carried for 5 years. She told her about the morning he died, about the tea she was making while he slipped away, about the silence that had followed and never lifted. When she finished, there were tears on her cheeks, though she had not felt them fall. Mina was quiet for a long moment. The afternoon light was soft through the window, falling across the floor in warm patterns. "May I tell you something about your father?" she said finally. Sora nodded. "The last time I saw him was 8 years ago. I passed through this village on my way somewhere else, and I stopped to visit. We sat together, much as we are sitting now, and we talked about our lives, about the years that had passed, about the things that mattered to us." She paused, and her eyes were bright with memory. "He talked about you, Sora. He talked about you for a long time. He told me about your kindness, your patience, your strength. He told me about how you listened to him, really listened, when most people just waited for their turn to speak. He told me about how you remembered the small things, his favorite foods, the songs he liked, the stories he had told you as a child." Sora's breath caught in her throat. "He said that you showed love in everything you did. The way you prepared his meals, always just the way he liked them. The way you mended his clothes so carefully that he could never find the stitches. The way you sat with him in the evenings, content to share silence, never needing to fill it with chatter." Mina reached out and took Sora's hand. "He knew, Sora. He knew you loved him. He did not need the words, because you spoke to him in a language deeper than words. Every meal you cooked, every shirt you mended, every evening you spent beside him in comfortable silence, those were all ways of saying what you think you never said." Sora felt something break open in her chest. The stone she had carried for 5 years cracked, and something warm flowed into the space where it had been. "But I wanted to say it," she whispered. "I wanted him to hear the words." "I know. And perhaps that would have been a gift for both of you. But the absence of those words does not mean the absence of love. It does not mean he did not know. He knew, Sora. He told me he knew. He said he was the luckiest father in the village, to have a daughter who loved him so well." The tears came freely now, but they were different tears. Not the tears of guilt, but something cleaner, something that washed away rather than weighed down. "I have punished myself for 5 years, Sora said, for something he already understood. We often do this. We hold ourselves to standards that love does not require. We think that love must be spoken in certain ways, expressed in certain words, or it does not count. But love is larger than words. It is larger than any single expression. Your father knew this. He lived this way himself, showing his love through action rather than speech." Mina squeezed her hand gently. "Forgive yourself, Sora. Not because what you did was wrong, but because there was nothing to forgive in the first place. You loved your father well. He knew it. He died knowing it. That is enough. That is more than enough." Sora sat with Mina until the evening came, and the stars appeared one by one outside the window. They talked about her father, about the small kindnesses he had shown throughout his life, about the quiet ways he had expressed his own love. And slowly, the stone in Sora's heart dissolved, replaced by something lighter, something that felt almost like peace. After Mina left, Sora went to her father's grave on the hill above the village. She sat beside it in the darkness, looking up at the stars that he had looked up at so many times. "I love you," she said aloud. The words came easily now. "Thank you for everything. You were a good father." The words went out into the night and disappeared. But they were not too late. They had never been too late. They were simply another expression of something that had been there all along, something he had always known, something that had been spoken in 1,000 ways throughout all the years of her life. She visited his grave often after that. Not to apologize, not to carry guilt, but simply to be near him. Sometimes she spoke aloud, telling him about her days, about her mother, about the small happenings of the village. Sometimes she sat in silence, feeling the connection that death had not severed. And when people asked her about her father, she no longer spoke only of the quiet woodcutter who said little. She spoke of a man who had loved deeply, who had expressed that love in ways that did not require words, and who had raised a daughter who had learned to love in the same way. The Buddha taught that attachment causes suffering, and we can become attached even to our own guilt. We carry burdens that do not need to be carried. We punish ourselves for failures that were not really failures. We hold on to regret long after it has served any purpose. The great matter invites us to examine our regrets and ask whether they are truly necessary. Sometimes we discover that what we thought was a failure was simply a different way of succeeding. Sometimes we discover that the love we thought was unexpressed was being expressed all along in ways we did not recognize. Living without regret does not mean making no mistakes. It means not carrying our mistakes longer than necessary. It means forgiving ourselves as we would forgive others. It means recognizing that we did the best we could with what we knew at the time, and that this is all anyone can ever do. Zen teaches us to put down what we do not need to carry. The stone of guilt, the weight of regret, the burden of wishing things had been different. These do not help us live better. They only make the journey heavier. When we set them down, we discover that we can walk more freely, more lightly, more fully into whatever time remains. Take a slow breath now and feel your body settling. If there is any weight of regret you have been carrying, let it rest for this moment. You do not need to solve it or fix it. Simply let it be, and let yourself be, here in this breath, free from the past. We have been exploring the great matter together, looking at how awareness of our mortality can awaken us to the preciousness of life. We have seen how facing death can clarify what truly matters, how urgency can free us from postponement, and how we can live without the weight of regret. Now we turn to something deeper still. Zen does not see birth and death as two separate events, one at the beginning of life and one at the end. It sees them as part of one continuous movement, like waves rising and falling in the ocean. Each wave appears, crests, and disappears, but the water itself is never lost. It simply changes form, becoming part of the next wave, and the next. This understanding can bring great peace. When we stop seeing death as an ending and begin to see it as a transformation, something in us relaxes. we realize that we are part of something much larger than our individual lives. We are expressions of a flow that has been moving since before we were born and will continue long after we are gone. Buddhism teaches that nothing is truly created and nothing is truly destroyed. Everything changes form, but the essence remains. The leaf falls from the tree and becomes soil, and the soil feeds new leaves, and the cycle continues without end. We are part of this cycle, not separate from it. Our lives are borrowed from the same source that everything is borrowed from, and to that source everything returns. The great matter, seen from this angle, is not about the tragedy of ending. It is about the mystery of transformation. It is about finding our place in a flow that is much larger than ourselves. Let us explore a story about a young man who was afraid of change and loss, and what he learned from an old woman who had spent her life on the river. In a village that sat beside a wide and slow-moving river, there lived a young man named Kai who was afraid of almost everything. He was afraid of change, afraid of loss, afraid of the way things never stayed the same no matter how much he wanted them to. He had been this way since childhood, clinging to toys long after he had outgrown them, weeping when the seasons turned, feeling a deep unease whenever anything in his life shifted from what it had been. His parents did not understand him. His friends found him strange. But Kai could not help what he felt. The world seemed to him like a place of constant disappearance. Everything he loved would eventually be taken from him. Everything beautiful would fade. Every person he cared for would someday be gone. And this knowledge sat in his chest like a cold stone, making it hard to fully enjoy anything at all. When Kai was 20 years old, his grandmother died. She had been the one person who seemed to understand him, the one who had held him when he cried over fallen leaves, the one who had never told him he was foolish for feeling what he felt. And now she was gone, and Kai felt the cold stone in his chest grow heavier than ever before. He stopped eating. He stopped talking. He walked along the river for hours each day, staring at the water, feeling the weight of all the losses he had experienced and all the losses still to come. Life seemed unbearable to him, not because anything terrible was happening now, but because he knew that terrible things would happen eventually. What was the point of loving anything if it would only be taken away? The villagers grew worried about him. They whispered among themselves, wondering what could be done. And finally, one of the elders suggested that Kai go to see the old boatwoman who lived at the bend in the river. Her name was May, and she had been ferrying people across the river for over 60 years. She had been born on the water, had spent her entire life on the water, and it was said that she understood things about coming and going that other people did not. Perhaps she could help the young man who was drowning in his fear of loss. Kai's father brought him to the riverbank, where May's small boat was moored. The old woman was sitting in the bow, mending a fishing net with gnarled fingers. Her face was deeply lined, weathered by decades of sun and wind and water. Her eyes, when she looked up at Kai, were clear and calm, like the river on a still morning. "This is my son," Kai's father said. "He is troubled. He fears loss more than anything. His grandmother died, and he cannot find his way back to living." May looked at Kai for a long moment, then nodded. "Leave him with me. Come back at sunset." Kai's father hesitated, then walked away. Kai stood on the bank, unsure what to do. "Get in the boat," May said. He climbed into the small wooden vessel and sat on the worn plank that served as a seat. May pushed off from the bank with her long pole, and they drifted out into the current. For a long while, she said nothing. She simply poled the boat along, sometimes letting the current carry them, sometimes guiding them toward one bank or the other. Kai watched the water flow past, brown and slow and endless. He watched the banks slide by, the trees leaning over the water, the birds rising and settling. "You are afraid of losing things," May said finally. It was not a question. Yes. What are you afraid of losing? Kai thought about it. Everything. Everyone. My parents. My friends. My home. He paused. Myself, I suppose. Someday I will be gone too. And this fear keeps you from living. How can I live fully when I know that everything I love will be taken from me? How can I enjoy anything when I know it will end? May was quiet for a while. She dipped her hand into the river and let the water run through her fingers. "Let me ask you something," she said. "Is this the same water that was here yesterday?" Kai looked at the river. It was a strange question. No. The water flows. The water that was here yesterday is far downstream by now. This is different water. And yet the river is still here. Yes. The river is still here. The water changes, but the river remains. May wiped her hand on her worn clothes. I have been on this river for 62 years. I have watched more water flow past than I could ever count. Every moment, the river is different. Every moment, the water I touched a moment ago is gone, replaced by new water. And yet the river itself is always here. It has never stopped being the river. Kai frowned, not quite understanding. "You are afraid of losing things," May continued. "But have you ever considered that nothing is truly lost? It only changes form. The water that flows past us now will become clouds someday, and rain, and perhaps fall on distant mountains and flow into a different river. Is it lost? Or has it simply moved on to become something else?" "But people are not water," Kai said. "When my grandmother died, she did not become a cloud or a river. She simply stopped existing." May smiled gently. "Did she? Let me ask you something else. When you think of your grandmother now, what happens?" Kai closed his eyes. He thought of her face, her voice, her warm hands holding his when he was small. He thought of the things she had said to him, the way she had made him feel understood and accepted. "I feel her with me," he said slowly. "In my memory. In the way I think about things. So she is gone, and yet she is here. She is no longer walking beside you, and yet she is walking inside you. The form has changed, but something remains." May paused. "This is what I have learned from the river. Nothing truly ends. It only transforms. The water becomes mist. The mist becomes cloud. The cloud becomes rain. The rain becomes river again. Around and around, changing form but never disappearing." The boat drifted in silence. A heron flew low over the water and landed on the far bank, standing perfectly still among the reeds. "Your grandmother's body is gone," May said. "But everything she gave you remains. The love she showed you is part of you now. The understanding she offered lives on in how you treat others. The words she spoke are still speaking, inside your mind, whenever you remember them. This is not poetry. This is the simple truth of how things work. Kai felt something stirring in his chest, something shifting beneath the cold stone he had carried for so long. "But I still miss her," he said. "It still hurts." "Of course it hurts. The missing is real. The grief is real. I am not asking you to pretend otherwise." May looked at him directly. "But there is a difference between grieving what has transformed and believing that it has been destroyed. Your grandmother is not destroyed. She has changed. And you are part of that change. You are how she continues in the world." She pointed to a spot on the riverbank where a large tree had fallen, its roots exposed, its trunk slowly returning to the earth. "Do you see that tree? It fell in a storm 3 winters ago. It was the largest tree on this part of the river. I had watched it for 60 years, had tied my boat to its roots more times than I could count. When it fell, I was sad. I missed its shade, its presence, its familiar shape against the sky." She guided the boat closer to the fallen tree. "But look at it now. Look at what is growing from it." Kai looked. The fallen trunk was covered with moss and small ferns. Mushrooms sprouted from its bark. At its base, young saplings were growing, fed by the nutrients the old tree was releasing as it returned to the earth. The old tree is gone as a standing tree. But it is not gone from the world. It is becoming these new trees, this moss, these mushrooms. It is feeding the very soil it once grew from. Its death is their life. Kai stared at the fallen tree, seeing it differently than he had seen anything before. "And my grandmother is everywhere you look if you know how to see. In you, in everyone whose life she touched. In the ripples of kindness that spread out from her kindness, touching people she never met. The form is gone. The love remains." They floated on. The sun moved across the sky, and the light changed on the water, shifting from gold to amber to the soft pink of approaching evening. "I have ferried many people across this river," May said, "happy and sad, coming and going. And do you know what I have learned?" Kai shook his head. "I have learned that the crossing never ends. We think there are 2 banks, here and there, life and death, having and losing. But really there is only the river, only the flowing. We are all always crossing, always in between, always moving from one form to another." She smiled. "The fear comes when we try to hold on to one bank or the other. The peace comes when we let ourselves flow." She guided the boat back toward the village. The sun was setting, turning the water to copper and gold. Kai's father was waiting on the bank, a worried expression on his face. But Kai was not the same person who had climbed into the boat that morning. Something had loosened in him. The cold stone was still there, but it felt smaller now, less solid. He could see around it to something else, something that the old boatwoman had pointed toward. He stepped onto the bank and turned back to look at May. "Thank you," he said. "I think I understand something I did not understand before." "What do you understand?" Kai looked at the river, at the endless flow of water that was always changing and yet always there. "I understand that I am part of something larger, that my grandmother is part of something larger, that losing her was not an ending, but a change in form." He paused. "I understand that I do not need to be afraid of the flow. I am the flow. We all are. May nodded slowly. Now you are beginning to see. The great matter is not about holding on. It is about learning to flow. When you can do that, death loses its terror. It becomes simply another bend in the river. Kai returned to the village that evening, but he came back to the river often in the years that followed. He would sit on the bank and watch the water flow past, remembering what May had taught him. And slowly, gradually, the cold stone in his chest dissolved, replaced by something else, a kind of peace that he had never thought possible. He still missed his grandmother. He still grieved the things he lost. But he no longer felt that life was unbearable because of these losses. He understood now that he was part of something that could not be lost, a flow that would continue long after he himself had transformed into something new. This story shows us how Zen understands the relationship between life and death. They are not opposites standing at either end of our existence. They are movements within a larger flow, transformations within a cycle that never truly ends. When we see this, the fear of loss begins to soften. We realize that nothing is ever completely lost, only changed. Buddhism teaches that what we call the self is not a fixed thing, but a process. Like a river, we are always changing, always flowing, always becoming something new. The person we were 10 years ago is not the person we are today, and the person we are today is not the person we will be tomorrow. And yet something continues, something flows on, just as the river continues, even though its water is always different. The great matter, seen this way, is not a problem to be solved or a fate to be feared. It is simply the nature of existence, the way things are. When we align ourselves with this truth, we find a peace that does not depend on things staying the same. We find a freedom that does not require permanence. Let your breath come naturally now, rising and falling like a wave. Notice how each breath arrives and passes, making room for the next. This is the rhythm of existence, the gentle flow of coming and going that holds all things. Rest here, in the movement, in the transformation, in the peace of being part of something larger than yourself. As we continue to explore the great matter, we come to a question that lives quietly in many hearts. What will remain when I am gone? What will my life have meant? Will I be remembered? And if so, for what? These questions arise naturally when we contemplate our mortality. We want our lives to matter. We want to leave something behind, some mark that says we were here, that our existence meant something. This longing for legacy is deeply human. But Zen offers a surprising answer to this question. It suggests that the legacy we worry about most, the achievements, the possessions, the monuments to ourselves, is not the legacy that truly touching people we may never meet, continuing long after we are gone. A single act of kindness can change a life, and that changed life can change others, and on through time. This is our true legacy. Not the things we build or own, but the love we set in motion. The great matter invites us to consider what we are leaving behind, not someday in the distant future, but right now, with every choice we make. Are we adding kindness to the world, or taking it away? Are we helping others or only helping ourselves? The answers to these questions shape a legacy that no monument can match. let us explore a story about a man who spent years trying to preserve his memory, and what a simple woman taught him about how remembrance truly works. In a town known for its scholars and its ancient library, there lived an aging man named Gim, who had spent decades writing the story of his life. He had been a teacher once, at the small school in the center of town, but he had retired many years ago to focus on what he considered his most important work, ensuring that he would be remembered. Gim's house was filled with papers. Stacks of manuscripts covered every surface, spilled from shelves, towered in corners. He had written about his childhood, his education, his years of teaching. He had recorded his thoughts on philosophy, his observations about the world, his opinions on matters large and small. He had documented everything, convinced that if he could just get it all down, some part of him would survive after he was gone. But now, Gim was old, and a troubling realization had begun to creep into his mind. He had written thousands of pages, but who would read them? His students had long since grown up and moved away. The library already had more books than anyone could read in a lifetime. His manuscripts would likely sit on a shelf gathering dust, or worse, be thrown away by whoever cleared out his house after he died. The thought haunted him. All those years of work, all those careful words, and in the end, perhaps none of it would matter. Perhaps he would be forgotten anyway, just another old teacher in a town that had known many teachers. There was an old woman named Pei who came to the temple near Gim's house each morning to clean. She had done this work for as long as anyone could remember, sweeping the floors, polishing the wooden beams, tending to the small garden in the courtyard. She could not read. She had never written anything. By the standards Gim used to measure a life, she had accomplished nothing at all. And yet people spoke of Pei with a warmth that puzzled Gim. When her name came up in conversation, faces would soften. People would share small stories about her, moments of kindness they had received, words she had spoken that had stayed with them. She seemed to be woven into the fabric of the town in a way that Gim, for all his writing, was not. One morning, Gim found himself walking to the temple. He was not sure why. Perhaps he was lonely. Perhaps he was hoping to find some answer to the question that plagued him. He found Pei in the courtyard, sweeping fallen leaves with a worn bamboo broom. "Good morning," he said. She looked up and smiled. Her face was deeply lined, her hair completely white, but her eyes were bright and present. "Good morning. You are the teacher who writes all the books. You know of me? Everyone knows of you. You have been writing for many years. People say you are trying to capture your whole life in words." Gim felt a flush of pride, followed quickly by the familiar anxiety. "Yes. But I wonder sometimes if anyone will read what I have written. I wonder if it will matter at all." Pei nodded slowly, as if this were a reasonable concern. "You want to be remembered. Is that wrong? To want your life to mean something? To want some part of you to continue after you are gone? It is not wrong. It is very human." She continued sweeping, her movements slow and rhythmic. "But may I tell you something I have noticed in all my years of cleaning this temple? Please. Many learned people have passed through here. Scholars and teachers and monks who wrote many books and gave many lectures. Their names are recorded in the temple archives. Their writings sit on the library shelves." She paused and looked at him directly. "But when people come to this temple and speak of those who have touched their lives, they do not speak of the scholars. Who do they speak of? They speak of small kindnesses. They speak of the monk who noticed they were hungry and brought them food. They speak of the teacher who saw they were struggling and stayed late to help them. They speak of the stranger who smiled at them on a dark day and made them feel less alone. She smiled gently. They speak of moments that the giver probably forgot, but the receiver never did. Gim was quiet for a moment. He thought of all the pages he had written, all the careful documentation of his life. He had recorded his achievements, his thoughts, his opinions. But had he recorded the moments that actually mattered? Did he even remember them? Your teacher, Pei said. The one who taught you to read. Do you remember him? Gim thought back, decades back, to the small school where he had first learned his letters. Yes. His name was Master Yun. What do you remember about him? Gim searched his memory. He was patient. When I struggled with a difficult character, he did not scold me. He sat beside me and guided my hand until I understood. The memory was vivid, more vivid than he expected. Once, when I was sick and fell behind the other students, he came to my house in the evenings to help me catch up. He did not have to do that. He had his own family, his own work. But he came anyway, night after night, until I was caught up. Another memory surfaced, one he had not thought of in decades. And there was a day when some older boys were tormenting me. They were calling me names, pushing me, making my life miserable. Master Yun saw it happening. He did not just stop them. He sat down with me afterward and talked to me. He told me that my worth did not depend on what others thought of me. He said that kindness and persistence would carry me further than any cruelty could hold me back. Gim's voice grew quieter. I have never forgotten that conversation. I think about it still, when I am feeling low. His words stayed with me for over 60 years. Did Master Yun write books about himself? No, I do not think so. And yet you remember him. Decades later, you remember his kindness, his patience, his willingness to help a struggling student. That is his legacy. Not words on a page, but the way he treated you. And perhaps the way you, in turn, have treated others because of what he showed you. Gim felt something shifting in his chest. He thought about his own years of teaching before he had retired to write. Had he been patient with struggling students? Had he stayed late to help those who were falling behind? He could not quite remember. He had been so focused on the content, on the curriculum, on preparing students for examinations. He was not sure he had been truly present for them as people. I have been writing about the wrong things, he said slowly. I have been trying to preserve facts and events. But what lasts is not facts and events. It is how we made people feel. Pei nodded. I cannot read. I have never written a word. When I die, there will be no record of my life. But I have swept this courtyard for 40 years, and in that time, I have spoken with many people. I have listened to their troubles. I have smiled at them when they looked sad. I have remembered their names, their children's names, the things that mattered to them. She gestured at the temple around them. This is my book. These walls, this courtyard, the faces that have passed through. I have written my life in how I have treated people. That is the only story that lasts. Gim walked home slowly that afternoon. He looked at the stacks of manuscripts that filled his house, the thousands of pages he had written. They suddenly seemed less important than they had before. Not worthless, but not the point either. He began to think differently about legacy, not as something he could capture in words and leave behind, but as something he was creating every day, with every interaction, with every choice to be kind or unkind, patient or impatient, present or absent. In the time he had remaining, he began to live differently. He stopped writing so obsessively and started visiting people. He looked up old students and asked about their lives. He sat with neighbors and listened to their stories. He went to the temple not to find answers for himself, but to help pay with her sweeping. When Gim died some years later, most of his manuscripts were indeed forgotten. They sat on a shelf in the library for a time, and eventually they were moved to a storeroom where no one visited. The carefully preserved facts of his life faded from memory. But people remembered the old teacher who had visited them in his final years. They remembered how he had listened, how he had asked about their children, how he had seemed genuinely interested in their lives. They remembered his kindness, even when they forgot his name. And in this way, without having written a single word about it, he left behind the only legacy that truly endures. This story shows us something that Zen has always understood. The legacy we worry about is usually not the legacy that matters. We concern ourselves with achievements and records, with monuments and memoirs. But what actually continues after we are gone is something simpler. The way we treated people, the kindness we showed, the love we gave. Buddhism teaches that all conditioned things are impermanent. Books decay. Monuments crumble. Names are forgotten. But kindness has a different quality. It passes from person to person, changing form but never quite disappearing. The patience someone showed us becomes the patience we show others. The love we received becomes the love we give. This is the true inheritance, and it requires no writing, no documentation, no effort to preserve. The great matter asks us to consider what we are leaving behind right now. Not someday, when we are old and looking back, but today. Every interaction is an opportunity to add to our true legacy. Every moment of kindness sends ripples forward through time. Let us explore a story about a woman who discovered that her father's life was not what she had believed, and what she learned about the nature of true success. In a city where merchants gathered from many lands, there lived a woman named Aya who had recently buried her father. He had been a trader, or so she had always believed, a man who dealt in fine goods and maintained connections with important people. He had dressed well, spoken confidently, and seemed to move through the world with the ease of someone who had achieved what he set out to achieve. Aya had been proud of her father. She had admired his success, his status, the respect that others seemed to show him. When he died, she expected to find evidence of this success among his belongings, records of profitable trades, letters from important clients, savings that reflected a life of accomplishment. Instead, she found almost nothing. His rooms contained few possessions. His records showed a long series of failed ventures, debts that had been paid off slowly over decades, businesses that had started with promise and ended with nothing. The fine clothes he wore had been his only ones, carefully maintained to create an impression that did not match reality. The ease she had seen in him was not the ease of success. It was something else, something she did not understand. Aya felt the ground shifting beneath her. The father she thought she knew seemed to dissolve, replaced by a stranger. Who had he really been? What had his life really meant? She felt ashamed of him, and then ashamed of her shame, and then simply confused. She began to visit the places her father had frequented, hoping to understand. She went to the markets where he had traded, to the tea houses where he had met with clients, to the temple where he had sometimes gone to sit quietly. And everywhere she went, he did not want it to go to waste. But we knew he had bought it himself. He came not once, but many times that winter. He never asked for anything in return. He never even mentioned it again. When I tried to thank him years later, he pretended not to remember. An old man who swept the streets told her about conversations they had shared over the years. He was the only one who asked my name, the only one who looked at me like a person. He would stop and talk with me, ask about my family, remember what I had told him the week before. Do you know how rare that is? To be seen by someone? Everyone else walked past me like I was part of the street. But your father saw me. He made me feel like I mattered. A woman who ran a small inn told her about a young traveler who had fallen ill many years ago. Your father paid for a room so the boy could rest and recover. He visited every day, brought medicine, sat with him. The boy had no family, no money, no one to care for him. But your father cared. When the boy was well again, your father helped him find work. That boy grew up to be a successful merchant himself. He has helped many people since then, always saying that someone helped him when he had nothing and he was passing it forward. Story after story. Kindness after kindness. Small acts that her father had never mentioned, never recorded, never pointed to as evidence of his worth. He had failed at business, but he had succeeded at something else. Something that left no ledger, no balance sheet, no official record. Aya found an old neighbor of her father's, a woman named Vera who had known him for decades. She went to visit her, hoping to understand what she was discovering. Vera was elderly and frail, but her memory was sharp. She welcomed Aya into her small home and poured tea with hands that shook slightly, but did not spill. "You want to know about your father," Vera said. It was not a question. I thought I knew him. I thought he was successful. I thought his life meant something because of what he had achieved. But now I find that he achieved nothing. His businesses failed. He had no money. The life I thought he lived was an illusion. Vera was quiet for a moment, sipping her tea. "When your father was young," she said finally, "he wanted very much to be successful. He wanted wealth and status and the respect that comes with them. He tried very hard. He was not lazy or foolish, but he did not have the ruthlessness that business sometimes requires. He could not take advantage of others, even when it would have benefited him. He could not step on people to climb higher." She set down her cup and looked at Aya directly. His businesses failed because he was too kind to succeed in the way the world measures success. He gave credit to those who could not pay. He shared his profits when others were struggling. He put people before transactions every time. Then his life was a failure. Was it? Vera smiled gently. "I have lived a long time. I have known many successful people, people with money and status and power. Most of them died surrounded by possessions but few friends. Their children came to collect their inheritance, not to mourn their loss. She gestured around her simple room. Your father had nothing to leave you. No inheritance. No wealth. But look at what he left instead. Look at the people who remember him. Look at the kindness that is still alive in this city because of how he lived. Look at the merchants who are kinder to their employees because of what he showed them. Look at the young people who believe in generosity because he was generous to things. Vera reached out and took Aya's hand. Your father's failure freed him. He had nothing left to protect, so he could give himself away. His businesses collapsed, but he did not collapse with them. He found a different way to succeed. He succeeded at being a good person. That is much harder than making money. Aya thought about all the stories she had heard. The loans that were never repaid. The food that was given away. The kindness that was shown to strangers and forgotten the next day. None of it had made her father rich. All of it had made him loved. I wish I had known, she said. I wish he had told me. He could not tell you. That is the nature of true generosity. It does not announce itself. It does not keep records. It simply gives and then forgets that it gave. Vera squeezed her hand. But you know now, and you can carry it forward. That is what he would have wanted. Not for you to mourn his failures, but for you to continue his kindness. That is the only inheritance that matters. In the years that followed, Aya lived differently than she might have otherwise. She had inherited her father's kindness along with his poverty. When she passed a person in need, she remembered the stories she had heard, and she stopped to help. When she had a chance to take advantage of someone, she thought of her father's gentle face, and she chose differently. She never became wealthy. She never achieved the status she had once hoped for. But when she died, many years later, people spoke of her the way they had spoken of her father, with warmth, with gratitude, with the particular softness that comes into the voice when remembering someone who was truly kind. And in this way, her father's legacy continued, not in records or monuments, but in the quiet accumulation of kindness, passed from one person to another, rippling forward through time. She would sometimes tell people about her father when the moment seemed right. She would tell them about the failed merchant who succeeded at something else entirely. She would tell them about the man who had nothing to leave behind except love, and how that love had proven to be worth more than any fortune. And sometimes, when she told the story, she could see something shift in the listener's eyes, a reconsideration of what matters, a softening of the relentless drive to accumulate and achieve, a recognition that there might be another way to measure a life. That too was part of her father's legacy, this story that lived on and continued to teach. He had written nothing, achieved nothing. The world would count as success. But his life was still speaking, still changing how people thought about what mattered, still sending ripples of kindness forward into futures he would never see. Zen teaches that what we accumulate in this life cannot be taken with us. Wealth, status, possessions, all of these remain behind when we go. But love is different. Love continues in the hearts of those we have touched. Kindness lives on in the people who received it and pass it forward to others. The Great Matter asks us to reconsider what we value. The world tells us to seek success measured in money and power and recognition. But when we contemplate our mortality honestly, these measures often seem hollow. What remains, what actually continues after we are gone, is the love we have given and the kindness we have shown. Buddhism speaks of merit, the positive energy that our good actions create. This merit does not disappear when we die. It continues to work in the world, bringing benefit to beings we may never meet. Every act of kindness adds to this storehouse of good. Every moment of compassion sends ripples forward through time. This is our true legacy. Not what we build, but how we love. Not what we achieve, but how we treat others. The Great Matter invites us to live with this understanding, to choose kindness over accumulation, to leave behind the only thing that truly endures. Let your body soften now and your breath settle into its natural rhythm. Consider the kindness you have received in your life and the kindness you have given. Both are part of a flow that is larger than any single life. Rest in this understanding, in the peace of knowing that love continues. We have traveled far together through this teaching. We have seen how awareness of our mortality can awaken us to the preciousness of life. We have learned how death can be a teacher rather than an enemy, how urgency can free us from postponement, how we can live without the burden of regret. We have discovered that life and death are not opposites, but part of one continuous flow, and that our true legacy is the love we give rather than the things we accumulate. Now we come to the heart of it all. After all the understanding, after all the stories and reflections, what remains is something very simple. The Great Matter asks us to make peace with existence as it is. Not to fight against impermanence, not to pretend that death is not real, but to accept these truths fully and discover the freedom that lies on the other side of acceptance. This peace is not resignation. It is not giving up or becoming passive. It is a deep alignment with reality, a willingness to say yes to life as it actually is, rather than demanding that it be something else. When we stop fighting against the truth of our mortality, something remarkable happens. We become more alive, not less. We become more present, more grateful, more able to receive the gift of each ordinary moment. It is a reality to be accepted, and in that acceptance, we find a freedom that no circumstance can take away. Let us explore a story about a young woman who cared for an elderly teacher in his final season, and what she learned about the relationship between acceptance and aliveness. In a quiet hermitage at the edge of a forest, where the trees grew tall and the silence was deep, there lived an elderly monk named Zan, who had practiced for over 60 years. He had come to the hermitage as a young man, full of questions and longing, and he had stayed through all the seasons of his life, watching the forest change around him while something in him slowly ripened. Now Zan was very old. His body had grown frail, his movements slow. He could no longer walk to the stream to fetch water or gather wood for the fire. The other monks at the main temple, a day's journey away, had sent a young woman named Kira to care for him in what everyone understood would be his final months. Kira was 23 years old and had been practicing at the temple for only 2 years. She had volunteered for this assignment because she thought it would be meaningful, a chance to learn from a great teacher before he passed. But she had also been afraid. She had never been close to death before. She did not know what to expect, what she would feel, how she would cope with watching someone fade. When she arrived at the hermitage, she found Zan sitting on the small porch, looking out at the forest. The autumn light was golden, filtering through leaves that were just beginning to turn. He looked up at her approach and smiled, and his smile was so warm, so genuinely welcoming, that her fear eased a little. "You are Kira," he said. "They told me you were coming. Thank you for making the journey. I am honored to be here, Master Zan." He gestured for her to sit beside him. "No need for titles. Just Zan is fine. We will be living together for a while. We should be comfortable with each other." In the days that followed, Kira settled into the rhythm of caring for the old monk. Birds in the trees. The taste of the simple rice she prepared. He would pause in the middle of a conversation to watch a leaf fall, following its descent with complete attention, as if it were the most fascinating thing in the world. "You seem so happy," Kira said one afternoon. They were sitting on the porch again, watching the shadows lengthen across the clearing. "I do not understand. You know that you are dying. How can you be so peaceful?" Zan was quiet for a moment, considering the question with the same attention he gave to falling leaves. "For most of my life," he said finally, "I was preparing for something that was always. When understanding came, I was preparing for enlightenment. Always there was something ahead of me, something I was moving toward, something that would happen later." He picked up a fallen leaf from the porch and turned it in his gnarled fingers, examining its colors, its veins, its perfect imperfection. "And now there is no more later. There is no future to prepare for. The road I have been walking my whole life has finally come to its end." He looked at her, and his eyes were bright with something she could not quite name. "Do you know what that feels like?" Kira shook her head. "It feels like freedom. For the first time in my life, I am not going anywhere. I am not trying to become something. I am not preparing for some future moment when things will be better or different. I am simply here, in this moment, with nothing to do but receive it." He set the leaf down gently on the railing. "All those years of practice, all those years of preparation, they were not wasted. They brought me here, to this porch, to this afternoon, to this conversation with you. But I wish I had understood sooner what I understand now. I wish I had known that the moment I was preparing for was always this moment. The life I was waiting for was always this life. I did not need to wait. I only needed to stop preparing and start living." Kira felt something stir in her chest. "But how can you not be afraid, knowing that the end is so close?" "I did not say I was never afraid. Fear comes sometimes, late at night when the darkness feels very deep. But fear is not the whole of it. There is also this." He gestured at the clearing, the trees, the golden light. "There is also the extraordinary gift of being alive right now, of being able to see this light, hear these birds, feel this air on my skin. The fear is small compared to the gratitude." He turned to look at her directly. "You are young. You have many years ahead of you, probably. But those years will pass faster than you can imagine. The future you are waiting for will become the past before you know it. And someday, if you are fortunate, you will sit on a porch like this one, looking back at your life, and you will wish you had been more present for it." He reached out and took her hand. His fingers were thin and cool, but his grip was surprisingly strong. "Do not make the mistake I made. Do not spend your life preparing for a moment that never arrives. The moment is always now. The life is always this one. Whatever you are waiting for, whatever you think you need before you can be truly happy, let it go. Be happy now. Be present now. That is the only teaching that matters. Kira felt tears forming in her eyes. Not from sadness, but from something else. A recognition. A sense of truth landing somewhere deep inside her. But I am young, she said. I have so much ahead of me. So many things I want to do, to learn, to become. How can I stop preparing when there is so much still to prepare for? Zan smiled gently. I did not say stop doing things. I did not say stop learning or growing or moving toward what calls you. I said stop believing that those things are where your life is. Your life is not in the future you are moving toward. Your life is in the moving itself. In this step, and this one, and this one. He gestured at the clearing, the trees, the light. Right now, you are caring for an old man in a hermitage. This is your life right now. Not what comes after, not what you will do when you return to the temple, not what you will become in 10 years or 20. This. Are you here for it? Are you receiving it? Or are you somewhere else in your mind, preparing for something that has not happened yet? Kira looked around her, really looked, perhaps for the first time since she had arrived. The golden light filtering through the trees, the smell of pine and wood smoke, the sounds of the forest, birds and wind, and the distant trickle of a stream. The old monk beside her, his presence warm and steady. She was here. She was actually here, in a way she had not been before. I see, she said quietly. I think I am beginning to see. Kira stayed with Zan through the autumn and into the early winter. She watched him grow weaker, watched his body slowly release its hold on life. But she also watched him remain present, remain grateful, remain more fully alive than she had ever seen anyone be. He did not spend his final weeks in regret or fear. He spent them noticing the way the firelight flickered on the walls, the taste of tea on cold mornings, the sound of wind in the pines. Each small thing received his full attention, as if he was seeing it for the first time, as if it were the most precious thing in the world. And in watching him, Kira learned something she could not have learned from any book or lecture. She learned that accepting death does not diminish life. It illuminates life. When we stop pretending that we have forever, every moment becomes precious. When we stop preparing for some future that may never come, we can finally receive the present that is always here. Zan died on a morning when the first snow was falling. Kira was holding his hand, and she felt the moment when his breath simply stopped, when the presence that had been there was no longer there. She cried because she had come to love him, because she would miss him, because death is sad even when it is peaceful. But she also felt something else, a kind of quiet joy that she did not expect. He had shown her how to die, which was really how to live. He had given her a teaching that would stay with her for the rest of her days. And in that giving, he had not ended. He had continued, in her, in how she would live, in what she would teach others. She buried his ashes beneath the trees he had loved, and she sat for a long while in the silence of the hermitage, feeling the snow fall around her, feeling the simple miracle of being alive. This story shows us what it looks like to make peace with the great matter. Zan did not overcome death or escape it. He accepted it, and in accepting it, he found a freedom that had eluded him his whole life. The preparation could finally end. The future could finally release its hold. There was only now, precious and complete. Zen teaches that acceptance is not defeat. It is alignment with reality. When we stop fighting against the truth of impermanence, we discover that the peace we were seeking was available all along. We were just too busy struggling to receive it. The Buddha taught that clinging causes suffering. We cling to life, to youth, to the way things were, to the hope that things will not change. And this clinging creates tension, anxiety, a constant resistance to what is. When we let go of this clinging, not by becoming indifferent, but by accepting what is true, we find a peace that does not depend on circumstances. The great matter is not asking us to like death or to welcome suffering. It is asking us to stop pretending that life is other than it is. And when we do, we find that the life we have is more than enough. It is extraordinary. It is a gift beyond measure. Let us explore a tale about a man who spent his life seeking enlightenment and what he found when he finally stopped looking. In a region where mountains rose sharp against the sky and the air was thin and clean, there lived a man named Taro who had spent his entire life searching for the truth. He had begun as a young man when a great restlessness had awakened in him, a longing to understand what life meant, what death meant, what anything meant at all. He had studied with teachers. He had read the ancient texts. He had meditated in caves and monasteries and forest hermitages. He had crossed mountains and rivers, seeking anyone who might have the answer he was looking for. He had devoted himself completely to the search, giving up comfort, giving up security, giving up everything that most people held dear. And yet the answer had not come. Decades passed, and Taro remained unsatisfied. He had glimpsed things, touched things, understood things. But the final piece, the complete resolution of his questioning, remained just out of reach. There was always another teaching to explore, another practice to try, another teacher who might have what the others had lacked. Now Taro was old. His hair was white, his body worn from years of wandering and discipline. He had come at last to a small village at the foot of the mountains, too tired to continue his search, too honest to pretend that he had found what he was looking for. In this village lived a woman named Leah who kept a small tea house. She was not a teacher. She had never studied with anyone. She simply made tea and served it to whoever came through her door. But there was something about her that drew Taro's attention. A stillness, a presence, a quality of being fully where she was. He began to visit her tea house each day, sitting in the corner, watching her move through her work. She did not seem to be doing anything special. She boiled water. She measured leaves. She poured tea. But she did these things with a completeness, an attention that Taro had rarely seen in all his years of searching. One morning, when the tea house was empty except for the two of them, Taro asked if he could speak with her. "Of course," she said, setting a cup of tea before him. "I have spent my whole life searching for the truth," he said. "For enlightenment. For some understanding that would put an end to my questions, that would show me what life and death really mean. I have studied with great teachers and practiced difficult disciplines, but I have not found what I was looking for." He paused, looking down at the simple cup in his hands. I am old now. I do not have much time left. And I am beginning to fear that I have wasted my life chasing something that does not exist. Leah was quiet for a moment. She refilled her own cup with careful attention, watching the tea flow from the pot. What were you looking for, exactly? I do not know anymore. Something that would make sense of everything. Something that would take away the fear of death, the confusion about life. An experience or understanding that would be unmistakable, final, complete. And you did not find it? I found many things. Moments of peace, glimpses of something larger, teachers who seemed to know something I did not. But nothing lasted. Nothing was final. The questions always returned. Leah nodded slowly. She took a sip of her tea, and Taro noticed how completely she seemed to be there for the sipping, how fully present she was for this small, ordinary act. May I tell you what I have noticed? She said. In all my years of making tea, please. The people who come here looking for something special never find it. They drink the tea quickly, barely tasting it, already thinking about where they will go next, what they will try next. They are not here. They are somewhere else, in their minds, chasing something that is always ahead of them. She set down her cup and looked at him directly. But sometimes someone comes who is not looking for anything. They sit down. They receive the tea. They taste it fully, feeling the warmth, the bitterness, the subtle sweetness. They are here, completely here, not wanting to be anywhere else. And these people, without trying, without seeking, without doing anything special at all, they seem to have what the others are searching for. Taro felt something tremble in his chest. What do they have? Presence. Just presence. They are not somewhere else. They are not chasing something that is always out of reach. They are simply here, tasting tea, feeling the morning air, being alive in this moment. She smiled gently. That is the only enlightenment I have ever seen. Not a special state. Not a final answer. Just this. Just being here. Just receiving what each moment offers. Taro looked down at his tea. He had barely touched it. He had been so absorbed in his questions, his seeking, his desperation for answers, that he had not even tasted what was in front of him. He lifted the cup to his lips. He let the tea enter his mouth slowly. He felt its warmth, its slight bitterness, the way it spread across his tongue and down his throat. He felt the cup in his hands, the smooth ceramic, the heat seeping into his palms. He heard the sounds of the morning, birds outside, wind in the trees, the soft crackle of the fire. And something shifted. It was not dramatic. There was no flash of light, no overwhelming experience, no sense of having finally arrived at a destination. There was just this cup of tea, this morning, this moment. And somehow, that was enough. For the first time in his life, that was enough. He looked around the simple tea house, the worn wooden tables, the steam rising from the pot, the light coming through the window, soft and golden. Everything was ordinary. Nothing was special. And yet everything was luminous, radiant with a beauty he had somehow missed while searching for something more. The seeking stopped. Not because he had found what he was looking for, but because he realized there was nothing to find. There was only this, always this, endlessly this. The enlightenment he had chased for decades was not somewhere else. It was here, in the taste of tea, in the warmth of the cup, in the simple fact of being alive. He thought of all the years he had spent, the mountains he had crossed, the teachers he had sought, the practices he had endured. None of it had been wasted, not really. It had all led here, to this moment, to this simple tea house, to this woman who made tea and poured it with presence. But he could have arrived here much sooner. He could have found this in any moment, if he had only stopped looking somewhere else. Tears came to his eyes, and he did not try to stop them. "All those years," he said quietly. "All that searching. And it was here all along." "It is always here," Leah said. "It cannot be anywhere else. The seeking is what hides it. The wanting something more is what obscures what is already present. When the seeking stops, even for a moment, there it is. There it always was." Taro stayed in that village for the rest of his life. He did not continue his search, because there was nothing left to search for. He helped Leah in the tea house sometimes. He sat in the morning light. He watched the seasons change on the mountains. He did nothing special, achieve better than an answer. Into peace, into acceptance, into the quiet joy of being alive for whatever time remained. When people asked him what he had learned in all his years of seeking, he would smile and pour them tea. "I learned that there is nothing to find," he would say. "And that in the finding of nothing, everything is given. I learned that the great matter is not a problem to be solved. It is a mystery to be lived. I learned that peace comes not from understanding death, but from being fully alive. And I learned that being fully alive is simpler than we imagine. It is just this, just being here, just receiving what is offered." And then he would drink his tea and watch the mountains and feel the extraordinary gift of ordinary existence. We have come to the end of our exploration together. The great matter has asked us to look at what we usually turn away from, the simple truth that we are born and we will die. But in looking at this truth, we have discovered something unexpected. We have discovered that awareness of death can make us more alive, not less. We have discovered that acceptance brings peace, and that peace brings presence, and that presence reveals the extraordinary gift hidden in every ordinary moment. Zen does not offer answers to the great matter. It offers something better. It offers a way of being with the question that transforms the question itself. When we stop fighting against impermanence, when we stop demanding that life be other than it is, we find that life is enough. More than enough. We find that this moment, this breath, this simple experience of being here contains everything we ever needed. The Buddha's final words to his students were simple. He told them that all things are impermanent and that they should work out their own freedom with diligence. This is the teaching of the great matter, not an answer to hold on to, but an invitation to live fully, to love completely, to be present for this precious and fleeting life. Let your eyes close gently now. Let your body release any tension it has been holding. Feel your breath moving in and out, this simple rhythm that sustains you without any effort on your part. We have journeyed together through the great matter, this teaching that Zen considers the most important of all. We have explored the preciousness of this life and discovered how awareness of its brevity can awaken us rather than frighten us. We have seen how death can be a teacher, clarifying what truly matters and stripping away what does not. We have felt the urgency to live fully now, to stop postponing our presence until conditions improve. We have learned that living without regret means walking our chosen path completely, rather than always looking at roads not taken. We have discovered that life and death are part of one continuous flow, and that nothing is truly lost, only transformed. We have seen that our true legacy is not what we build or accumulate, but the love we give and the kindness we show. And we have found that peace comes not from solving the great matter, but from accepting it, from aligning ourselves with reality as it is, rather than demanding that it be something else. This life is brief and precious. The people we love will not be here forever. This moment will not come again. These are not reasons for despair. They are invitations to wake up, to pay attention, to receive the extraordinary gift that each ordinary moment offers. You do not need to fear death when you are truly living. And you can begin truly living right now, in this breath, in this awareness, in this simple fact of being here. Sleep well, and thank you for joining us here at Sleepy Monk.